I've noted that many of our community college transfers into the UCs actually do better. So it's, in many cases, they do just as well. I think there's a bipartisan interest in dual enrollment programs, both in terms of folks that can finish high school with 2 years of community college under their belt and go, matriculate straight into a 4-year university. Many of those students want to actually do those 4 years in addition, or maybe get a head start on a master's degree. So I would recommend that we actually kind of look at, as a committee, do some site visits to early college high schools, look at Dr. Botstein's work at Bard College and the Bard College experiments in Lower Manhattan. I think we could see, not only from the savings point of view, but from the effectiveness of challenging young people much earlier in high school. So I think this is a good bipartisan topic for us. Now, we've heard today about the types of students that competency-based education providers are serving. We've heard a lot about working adult students, first-generation students, and students of color. As you know, these students are so often aggressively recruited by low-quality for-profit institutions that charge too much for a degree not worth the paper it's printed on. Given the rapid growth of competency-based education programs and providers, it seems clear that some companies see this as a business opportunity. Now, are there ways that with Congress, we can make sure that we do not allow students who have been historically underserved by our educational systems to be taken advantage of in our desire to adopt new models and approaches? This question is for Ms. Erickson.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Takano. And this committee is really lovely because you have former educators on it. It's nice to hear that conversation. So I think that this is exactly the right question, and it is where our desire for innovation and experimentation really needs to come together with guardrails. So I think that already we have within the Higher Education Act the Experimental Sites Authority, which Dr. Carroll mentioned as well, where we can actually pilot things. We can say something that's required under current law or regulations maybe is holding folks back. Let's test it and see if that's true or not. And then let's see how the students do. And I think, importantly, we need to see how disaggregated groups of students do in those programs, because it might be the case that some students who perform very well, say coding camp that's recruiting Harvard undergrads, looks pretty good because they're Harvard graduates that they're recruiting into those programs, but might actually perform incredibly poorly for another group of students. And I think that is really why we need to also pass the College Transparency Act, so that we can really have that access to the data to see which students are you serving well with this program, and are you in fact seeing folks trying to innovate in order to just make more money off of students, or are they really invested in student success?
Thank you for that. Well, Congress needs to be responsible and cautious about authorizing competency-based education in statute. And while there are benefits of high-quality innovations, there are also risks to both students and taxpayers in any new model of higher education that isn't focused on outcomes. So Ms. Erickson, can you tell us more about what makes a quality CBE program and what kinds of things we should be looking for to ensure that programs put students first?
Absolutely. I think the upside of the CBE opportunity is that it can provide relevancy and flexibility so that we're meeting our workforce needs as they change, and also allowing people to not have to sit their butts in a seat for a certain amount of hours, but really be able to show that they can do the work, that they know the material and can move on. But I think we also need to make sure that those students are getting a high quality education. And one of the things that we learned during COVID is that online programs have real limitations. They have opportunities, but they have limitations. And as a person who was living in a house with an 8th grader and a 5th grader going to school online, there were some real limitations there when our schools were closed for a long time in Virginia. And so I think we need to make sure that particularly with those online programs, we are encouraging regular and substantive interaction with educators who are accredited and trained to do that interaction, so that essentially taxpayers aren't just funding a very expensive YouTube video.
Well, thank you so much, Ms. Erickson. And Mr. Chairman, this is a very interesting hearing to me. I'm sorry that my time is up, and I yield back. There's so many more questions I have of the witnesses. It's a great lineup.
Thank you, and I too agree. I love this bipartisan